Many of you love the beach. You love what activities you can do there, like swimming, surfing, and making sandcastles. You love the sound of the ocean. You love to watch the waves crash upon the shore, digging its foamy fingers through the sand, only to crash again and again. Water is very important to us. Not only does it keep us alive, it provides our earth just the right circumstances to create life. And that's what happened during the Archean Eon, when our earth was still a kid in age. When finally the earth was cool enough to let water settle in shallow seas, and at the bottom of the ocean floor there were volcanic vents that spewed out a rich mineral and chemical soup. There, somehow, a spark of life began. And it was tiny, microscopic, basically a string in a bag, a strand of DNA in a cell membrane. Scientists call this first life form LUCA, or our last universal common ancestor, the one that started it all. And somehow, this DNA strand in a bag, this tiny bacterial cell, began to pinch in the middle, right in half, and broke, making one into two. And this must have happened again. 2 became 4. 4 became 8. And over time, the entire ocean was filled with microscopic life. Some of that microscopic life was plant-like because it took its energy from the sun, like cyanobacteria. Cyano means blue, and this bluish-greenish bacteria gave off byproducts and oxygen, making the gas flood into the atmosphere, which would become very important to us later. Other bacteria had a different way of getting their energy. Instead of converting light energy for their own use, they surrounded other life forms and ate them instead. These could be considered the first animal-like cells. Some of these animal-like cells began to clump together, forming row after row like Legos, making walls, making tissues that could have different functions, and we had our first animals. Our porifera, our sponges, and our sea squirts. They don't look much like the animals we know. They don't move. They look like columns, and they are. They're just columns of cells. But they're also filter feeders, where water flows through them, and as the water pushes out through the walls, the little cells grab onto the plankton floating by. These tissues became more complex, coming together to make organs, and the oceans became more diverse. We had our crinoids, our sea lilies, that were like a cup on a string, flowing back and forth in the sea current to collect their food. We had our jellyfish, that's basically a floating mouth. And then there was the trilobite, with their many legs, some as small as your pinky nail, while some were longer than 3 feet. Not only did they live 270 million years as a species, they had 20,000 different types. Trilobites truly win the Best Existing Species award. But the ocean continued to grow more complicated in the age of the fish. In the Devonian period, you had 2 major types of fish: your fish with your big bony armor, and your smaller, faster lobed fish. Now life is a competition, and surprisingly, the winner might not be who you think it is. With the bony armored fish, no one could eat them, but they were too slow to catch their own food, so their race died out. Life is not about perfection. It's about survival and adapting to the environment. Plant life also began to change from aquatic to lichens and mosses that would climb out of the ocean to break down the rock into soil, paving the way for other plants to start modifying themselves upon the shore. Over time, there became ferns and mushrooms that don't have seeds, but spraying spores. Only after another million years did the world see our conifers with palm and pine trees, and our gorgeous flowering trees, as the first animals that really went to land were our bugs. Our horrible, huge bugs. It was a bug world. You did not want to live then. There were millipedes of over 4 feet long. There were dragonflies with wingspans of 6 feet. It was a terrible, terrible place. Now, scientists observe and collect data, and they see a trend about offspring and how over millennia, populations of animals evolved with a more efficient egg. It's all about the egg, the great biological invention. Because the more eggs that live to adulthood, the better the chances that species has to change and survive. And let's face it, fish don't care about their babies. They have soft eggs, and if you're not careful, your pet fish will actually use their own eggs for food storage and eat their babies. Amphibians are a little better with their partial lungs and their gel-like eggs, but reptiles, like our ancient dinosaurs, were great. Their eggs had a shell with a leather surface, and they actively hid their eggs from predators. By the way, did you know many dinosaurs could have had feathers? From our dinosaurs, time leads to our first birds, and they have one of the best eggs of all. Their eggs are hard, made out of calcium, with a design so brilliant that their eggs cannot be crushed from the top and bottom. You always have to crack them from the sides. Birds also take care of their young, feeding them until they leave the nest. Then we come across our first mammals, who instead of having their eggs outside their body, they keep them inside their bodies, giving birth to live young. They raise and protect their offspring until adulthood, just like your parents do for you. Now remember, it was not often the strong, but the small that survived, because evolution is not about survival of the fittest. Evolution is just a trend of what populations of species can adapt best to its environment. And many species don't make it. In our planet's history, so far there have been 5 major extinctions. Extinctions that came from climate change with glaciers and ice ages, poisonous gas in the atmosphere so thick that nothing can breathe, extreme volcanic activity, and yes, violent impacts by meteorites. In the largest of these extinctions, 96% of all species on Earth were completely wiped out. Everything that you see today possibly came from the remaining 4%, including what could have been our early common ancestors at the end of this timeline, the hominids, that you'll learn more about in the next great lesson, The Coming of Man. But this is not the end. Populations will continue to adapt to the world around us. For example, did you know in Asia, scientists have found a strain of bacteria that can eat plastic? Mother Nature is incredible. Life will continue. Life can adapt. It's up to us to see if our human race can adapt with it to make the world better, kinder, new. The end. Thank you.